All right, excellent. Well, welcome everybody to our event today. We have a pretty incredible group lined up for you here. I'm going to introduce them each, and then, guys, as I introduce you real quick, just would love to tell us your company, but also give these guys a sense of the type of influencer ad dollars you control or have some influence over. I think I'm trying to establish credibility, and I think that'll help me do it. So first, we have Dave Smith, CEO of Mediasmith, the Smith in Mediasmith.
Right, Dave Smith, CEO, founder of Mediasmith, and I'm billing almost what I've been telling people, so I've got to change the number. We're very involved in standards, data, technology for our industry, and that's the viewpoint that we come from.
Hi, I'm John Montgomery, the COO of GroupM Interaction. I think probably more important than being the COO is I've curated mobile in our organization for about 6 or 7 years now, and it's something that's particularly close to my heart. I really want to see it succeed. GroupM, as you know, is a large media agency. We probably will bill between $3 and $4 billion this year on digital, which we'll place on behalf of our clients, and so mobile has to take a share of that.
Yeah, hi, my name is Chen. I lead the mobile practice for Digitas LBI in North America. So in terms of the actual dollar amount of investment that we do for our clients in the mobile space, I think I can't give specific numbers, but it's triple-digit millions. How about that?
All right. So I think collectively, you guys are representing somewhere $5 to $10 billion. So I think we've established credibility. I'd love to know who we're talking to. I mean, how many of you are publishers, for example? Just raise your hand out there. Okay, a few publishers. Third-party ecosystem players, okay? Advertisers, marketers, agencies, okay. So our preponderance is actually the advertisers and marketers themselves with some publishers and third-party folks thrown in. I think, David, we'll start off. We've got a panel about a world without the cookie, right? Or without the cookie monster. When is that world exactly going to arrive, right? That's the first question, is defining the problem. Is it here now? Is it coming? Where are we at when it comes to the cookie as a technical path forward for tracking and understanding consumers?
Well, the exact date is hard to say, but over the last couple of years, we've been talking about if, and I think over the last 90 days, it's become when. All right, so there are a number of things that are at factors here. Obviously, the mobile area without cookies. Google's, what they say was an accidental announcement, but it was a nice accident. It was in USA Today last week about them eliminating cookies and going to unique IDs for devices. You take that, you combine that with the browsers that are do not track, and very, very quickly, within a year or two, you've got a situation where you could argue 50, 60, 70% or more of all impressions have no cookies. So we have to deal with a world without cookies very quickly.
Yeah, Dave, I think you're right. I think what I would add to that is that cookies were never going to cut it for mobile anyway. So I think the real issue is how do we solve the problem of measurement and attribution in a way that respects consumer privacy for mobile. Cookies may well continue to exist in the display space, but it really doesn't matter for us. We should have been a year further ahead than we are right now in an alternative to cookies, and we're not. So we really have to be moving fast, and if we're not thinking about it right now, we should.
John, anything to add?
Yeah. So this is not about the Sesame Street character? I'm sorry. I just wanted to get that in there. But in case so the thing about it is like so I think I think that the death of cookies is definitely kind of a fact of life in the mobile space. I think though as an agency, right, it's an interesting problem, right? But it's an intermediary to the larger problem, right? Which is like, hey, we need to figure out like true kind of cross-channel attribution. We also need to figure out how to actually target individuals rather than just devices and browsers and screens. And then finally, we have to figure out what's the reliable mechanism for us to allow us to kind of buy programmatically, right? Because we want to do that in the mobile space as well. So, honestly, like it could be like we don't know what shape that is going to take, that like mechanism is going to be able to do that. We certainly are very, very interested in kind of pursuing a number of approaches with the help of some partners. But you know, at the end of the day, it is about kind of like being able to attribute, being able to reach individuals and not just screens, and then being able to kind of enable really kind of accurate programmatic buying.
Yeah, so I think what I heard a lot of was, you know, we talked specifically about the cookie, but really this is a representation of a much larger issue around a crisis of understanding around the audience, right? And you've got multiple technologies kind of cropping up, or nothing exists at all. It creates problems in many areas: attribution, privacy, et cetera. So I think, you know, what I'd love to talk a little bit about more is on the privacy side, right? It seems like one of the things that we've got to get right, and John, I think this is near and dear to kind of what you look about and think about a lot. How do we strike the right balance at this point? I mean, historically, the cookie has been a hard identifier. It's really been very scalable. It's worked sort of very well up to a couple years ago. We have both a collapse in that identification system technically, as well as a rise in the privacy concerns. So give us your thoughts on how GroupM's thinking about it in terms of getting the balance right, right?
Yeah, it's the dilemma. I'm sure I absolutely agree with you. We want all that data, but are we going to be allowed to get it, and are we going to be legislated against? And what about the consumer? And one of the things that we have to always start off with is just recognizing that the consumer owns the data. We get to use it, and we get to use it if we respect, you know, their privacy and their data security. And whether we're allowed to do that or not, I think at the end of the day, if we're building a long-term relationship with a consumer, we have to do it in a way that's not creepy, and we have to start educating consumers about why we're collecting data, what the value exchange is. They're getting this a huge amount of free content and access to almost any information that they need on the mobile web, and they're doing that because it's advertising supported, so that there's this value equation that we have to start educating consumers about, and that we've been very slow to do. Right now, I think consumers don't see the difference between data collected for government surveillance purposes and whether we use a cookie or an identifier for advertising purposes. So we've got a huge road to travel before we're able to get consumer acceptance for this. And consumer acceptance is the thing that's more important than legislation, in my view.
Yeah, and David, you had talked about that, and the consumer is a much better advocate or spokesperson than the government.
I'd rather have a plebiscite among the consumers, even as much as they don't know today, than have the government vote on this. You're talking about people who have their assistants print out their emails that they can read on the train home at night, and wouldn't know how to enable or disable their cookies. So I trust the consumer, even though they don't know enough, and we've got to educate them more. I trust the consumer more in this than the government.
And Chia, I mean, you know, when it comes to your position, your point of view on this, what can we do at this point to start educating the consumer? It seems like we've been reactionary as an industry for a couple of years now. We sort of felt behind the eight ball when it came to alarmist sort of print and news articles about what we're doing. Any thoughts or anything you're observing in the industry that can help transition us as a group from reactionary and sort of defensive to some proactive way to explain what we're really doing? Put you on the spot there.
Yeah, no. So, you know, the thing about Digitas LBI is that we're not only kind of a media planning and buying agency, we're also a creative agency. So, like, there's a little bit of a schizophrenia there. I'm not schizophrenia, but there's a little bit of two-mindedness there, right? As a creative, you know, agency, you want all that data to be able to create very, very relevant experiences, right? You know, you don't want to cross the line of being super creepy. But at the same time, you know that really kind of having that data, having the insight about what the consumer is doing, what they want, and being able to tie that to the content you're providing them is like it's the thing that actually drives better response. But you know that's a pretty short-term kind of campaign-focused outlook. But honestly, you know, from our perspective, there's two parties, right, that really need to kind of initiate kind of the education of the consumer. One is the publishers, right? So, you know, it's not super helpful for you to have these terms and conditions or these privacy policies that are like 25 pages long, right? And the option is to actually send it to you via email. But, you know, everybody's going to say, I agree, and just click on past, right? So we need to figure out how to actually state that much more plainly. The second is like the advertisers. The advertisers need to actually. They're the people who power the ecosystem with their dollars. So they need to get the publishers to care a lot more about that, right? Because on the one hand, you can't sit there and say to the publishers, oh no, well, you have to be kind of really respect the privacy thing, and make sure that you're not stepping over a line. But on the other hand, we're also going to pay you a lot more if you get us this data.
Yeah. So it is an important balance to get right. I mean, John, we were talking a lot about this, and even over the last couple of weeks, there's been some really positive movement and momentum in some of the organizations where we need to have it, namely the DAA, the NAI, the guidelines. I think for this group, talk about that, what's happening there a little bit, and kind of their press releases, and I think that's helpful to a path forward in exactly this area, right?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I just wanted to build on what Chia said. Some of the things that we're doing, and I really would encourage everybody in an agency to be doing the same thing, was there are a lot of publishers. In fact, every a mobile publisher is going to our planning teams right now and saying, we have a privacy-friendly solution. And then a lot of our planners who don't understand the space really well are saying, well, privacy-friendly, check. And when we go into it and when we dive into the technology very carefully, probably 10% of those solutions are privacy-friendly. So I think one of the things that we're doing is we're doing privacy technology audits right now. Companies like AdTruth, AdConian, those kinds of companies, we're really looking at them very, very carefully and saying, what is their technology? How are they identifying consumers? How good is it from a targeting perspective? How good is it from a privacy compliance perspective? So we're deeply engaged in that. We've been engaged in that for about 3 months now, and we're going forward with testing. And this is one of the things that we absolutely should be doing. And on your second question on the DAA, whilst mobile is different to display, there are a lot of similarities between what happens in display and what happens in mobile. And I think the positive momentum that has been created by the DAA, they're serving nearly 1 trillion icons of the little ad choices icon on ads at the moment. There are 40 million hits on their ad choices website every month. More than 1 million people have opted out. We didn't want them to opt out, but we did give them the opportunity to do that. So it means that this thing is starting to work. It's imperfect, but it's starting to work. And I think that as a mobile industry, we should embrace what's been done, embrace that momentum, and start moving forward. My real worry with Google, apart from more power to the few, my real concern with Google is that they come up with a solution that's different to the solution in the rest of the industry, where the consumer now has to understand something completely different. And not only will we be accused of obfuscating the privacy issue, we will be obfuscating the privacy issue. We need a solution that's ubiquitous across the industry, and at least the DAA has started doing that. It's gone across to Europe now. They're the same icon in Europe, and I really think we should be embracing that for mobile and improving on it wherever we can with better technology.
Yeah, I mean, so I think what I've heard now, and I'll come back to you, David, on this, is it seems like we've got, one part of the solution is, hey, publishers, be more transparent, talk about what you're doing, simplify things for your consumers, right? That's kind of what Chia's point was. John has sort of talked about the fact that the advertisers, we can in mobile, I think this is very important news for this group, there is now emerging a path forward for mobile to really get behind the DAA as John articulated. So now you have advertisers and that icon program, you have publishers. What's in the middle, right? It's the identification technology itself. So I'd love for you to, as we move into the next phase of the discussion, talk a little bit at a high level about what are the different flavors of identification, and particularly maybe educate on probabilistic or statistical approaches, like AdTruth, like a lot of these companies are building, versus deterministic approaches, and just kind of educate a little bit on what the options are out there.
Well, the parallel in probabilistic versus what I call census-based is taking a look in the audience area at a ComScore versus a Quantcast. The Quantcast sees every IP address in the U.S. every month, and so they've got a census, whereas ComScore and Nielsen take a sample, right? Now, the sample can give us a lot more richness, and it can give us a depth because they're able to go in and ask questions of consumers and project that out on a probabilistic standpoint. But the things that identify the machines and the devices are able to look at everything. And so I don't think it's a less filling tastes great argument here. I think that we need both of them in order to have a robust solution in the end. We need to be able to identify the devices, and as you guys said, we need a standard. That standard may be way out in the future with Internet Protocol version 6, and we can talk a little bit more about that. But we need a standard relative to machine and device identification, and yet we need the richness of data that's going to happen through going out and statistically sampling and getting more information about people. We really need both of those, and I don't think it's a choice of one versus the other.
Yeah, so I guess to just to play that back a little bit for purposes of clarity, you've got hardware IDs, like cookies or IDs on these devices that are essentially your census example. They're marking the device deterministically. Then you've got probabilistic approaches, statistical models, where the data on these devices can be modeled to represent an identifier. And those two approaches can, in fact, work hand in hand. In fact, that's what a lot of people are out there doing. This brings out about a whole discussion or question on essentially the power struggle here going on between first party and third party. Who owns the data? Who doesn't own the data? Google's announcement strikes at the very heart of this. Are we moving from an era where the data was running pretty freely, pretty wildly, to a new time in the industry and perhaps a necessary time to get the balance right between consumer privacy and identification, where first parties are now going to come and take more control of that data based on their identification technology as well as just their position in market? Is that question making sense? It's about the shift from third-party data to going back to first-party ownership of that data and retention of that data shared with consumer permissions for your use.
If I may just jump in here one more time. The first-party argument is a lot of times couched in terms of sites, right? And I think there's a reason why advertisers call them customers and sites call them visitors, right? I think that the advertisers and agencies have to look at first party from an advertiser standpoint in addition to first party from a site standpoint. An agency today, if they're going to solve this problem for their clients, they've got to get in line and get a DMP, consider a robust tagging situation, and get control of their own data, and then their clients' data, rather, and then combine that with first-party data that the powerful publishers like Facebook and Google have, and then you've got something that will work. But if we look at first-party data, just as what the publishers have, we're not going to be able to do things like attribution and be able to do customer lifetime value and a lot of other things that we want to do. So this is really a good thing in that it might be a wake-up call for advertisers and agencies to start looking at things from a first-party rather than a third-party standpoint.
Yeah, James, I also want to, that's absolutely right, and you have to have a DMP. We have to start doing proper attribution modeling to be able to see, who should get the credit for the impression. But I also want to talk about the myth of the first party and the first party privacy. A lot of first parties are saying, we are pure, we're giving the opportunity, we're giving the consumer a choice, and we've asked for permission. Our contention is, in fact, that the first party data is least transparent because I think, as Chia said, who's going to read through a 24-page privacy policy that Apple puts in front of them? So you just say yes. And in fact, have you ever tried saying no to the iTunes update? You might just get a blue screen in front of you. So you don't have a choice. And in fact, there's no transparency once you've said yes because you have no idea how that data is being collected and being used, where at least as a third party, it's very, very simple. We'll show you an icon if we're collecting data, and if you don't want us to collect data, you'll just opt out via that icon. So I just want to, there's this myth of this kind of first party, and because they have permission, your permission to collect data, or the consumer's permission to collect data, that in somehow it's privacy friendly. It's the opposite.
Well, I think the point about like the advertisers really kind of taking a very active role in owning their data and managing their data very carefully is especially pointed in kind of the mobile space, right? Like as we talked about, so one of the things we talk to our clients about is that the fact that mobile is probably the most individuated kind of channel, right? It is the thing that is most closely mapped to a single person. And to not have like some kind of a strategy or a plan to actually use the data that you capture and you have on that customer is it's a huge missed opportunity.
It's all true, but why we as third parties why it's really important for us as third parties to collect that data is that we need to see the consumer's journey across all devices, across all platforms. One first party can't do that, client first party can't do that. Third party data is absolutely necessary for you to be able to do attribution modeling, frequency capping. We need to see the consumer's journey across all platforms to be able to do that properly.
So this leads to the inevitable question about, we mentioned earlier, Google, right? So, good or bad, or maybe there's some good and some bad, and we'll go on the line here. Google's announcement, good or bad for the industry? What's your perspective on that? Maybe a little bit of both.
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. I mean, we don't know what that announcement means. We don't know what they're going to do and when they're going to do it. Google often takes a lot longer. They're a huge company now. It takes a lot longer for them to do something than the PowerPoint that they put up in front of you than say they're going to do something. So it could take some time. Hopefully they will listen to the rest of the industry and sit at the table with the rest of the industry and do something that is in the industry's interest rather than just, and in the consumer's interest rather than just in Google's interest. But it's really hard to say. I mean, we love doing business with Google. It works really well.
Yeah. It's a possibility right now. It could be
a possibility that
yeah.
it could be very damaging to the industry, but if they do it right, it could really help the industry because nobody's taken enough leadership here for us to have a good industry solution. So if they could do it from a standpoint of leadership, but including the industry, but it's hard to say whether they will do that or not.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I do know about Google is that they have a long view. They're very, very smart people. There are a whole bunch of things that make me very concerned about it from a third party, from an ad agency, from a perspective that we represent a number of clients. But who knows what Google's motivations here are. They could well be playing to Congress. They could well be saying, we're privacy friendly, so we're finding a cookieless solution. And or otherwise they may well be saying, you know what, the first party data that we collect, as much as they collect data probably on 70% of the population, it's not enough, we want it all. And that for me would be a concern. So, as Dave says, we really are hypothesizing like mad here. When I reached out to Google, they said, we're in the very, very early stages of this discussion. We'll involve you. I don't know what that means, but we'll involve you when we're closer to it. So we really don't know their motivation, but we just do know that knowing Google, they're in it for the long haul. They think very strategically about the space, and they think about it very long term.
You mentioned, by the way, that they said that they didn't mean for it to be leaked. It was too early. Well, it's very interesting that it didn't leak to Ad Exchanger or something very vertical. It leaked to USA Today, which Congress is likely to be reading.
So maybe starting, Chia, with you. Let's jump into, we got 10 minutes left, like solutions. I mean, we're on an endless pursuit to solve this problem. I mean, what are you specifically with your company doing right now to think about and try to solve for this issue, this crisis of identification?
So we're definitely talking to some of we're talking and testing the solutions that we talked about. Things like TapAd or Adelphic, right? So they're we're looking at, and actually Adelphic in some ways is part of the ViviKey stack right now for as part of the AOD for mobile. But so there's definitely those types of solutions. We're also talking to, from a targeting and data management perspective, we're also talking to like the multi-channel kind of like platform players, platform publishers like a Google and a Facebook and an Amazon, for example, who have like this single sign-on that spans different screens. They're able to really kind of identify people on an individual basis or an anonymous basis, like for specific segments. So those are the things that we're testing right now, and we're really, really pushing hard to get kind of to get outcomes from those tests to see what is the best set of tactics or set of strategies to be able to help us kind of bridge the gap until we get to like a longer term standard.
Yeah. So John, I mean, you and I were talking about this quite a bit, but in everything that sort of you mentioned, Chia, the underneath every one of those solutions, they still need some sort of identification layer, right? Every one of those is still struggling with the same problem.
Oh, that's the NSA. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh, that's the NSA. Okay, so you're using the NSA. Wow, that's a great
Well,
solution.
that was a joke.
John, so go a level deeper, right, to what's underneath all these companies, and how are you thinking about it at GroupM, and what kind of how you're pursuing this?
So if you think about what we need, we need a way of identifying a consumer so that we know which device that they're using, and so that we could understand their behavior across devices and across platforms, and so we can serve the right ad to them on the right device at the right time. That's what we really want. But we have to do that, and we know we have to do that. And in fact, where cookies are allowed, they do an admirable job. But the regulators and the privacy advocates aren't comfortable with that. So we've got to do that in a way which is done perhaps in a probabilistic way, where we cannot do it on a census basis, because that way you identify a device and somebody has made the decision that the device is the same as a personal, as PII, so we've got to be very, very careful about that. And so we have to find a way of identifying them and at the same time talking to privacy advocates, talking to consumers, and talking to regulators to say, if we go this direction, will it be okay? Because you know what, we may come up with an extremely clever solution, and in 6 months' time, somebody from FTC will say, nah, sorry, we don't like that one either. So it's a very, very delicate thing we're doing. At the same time, what we're doing is we're talking to data companies like BlueKai to say, well, if you had this kind of data and combined it with that kind of data, what would happen? And if the FTC start asking these kinds of questions, how will we answer them? So it's a very complex, multi-layered thing. But we have to be trying, and we have to be testing a number of different solutions. But I don't think that anything close to what we're doing at the moment is going to cut it. It's going to have to be some combination of probabilistic and census-based.
Okay, I'm going to just jump in for a second. Wonderful discussion. Does anybody have a question for these gentlemen? No one at all? Okay, gentlemen, you can continue for another couple minutes. Oh, we do have one. Okay. Who was the person that held their hand up? If you want to stand up so I can see you. Okay,
That's all right.
maybe it was a ghost. I don't know. Okay, gentlemen, continue.
Okay, thanks. So we just have a couple more minutes. I think, Luke, in wrapping this up, I mean, it sounds a bit doom and gloomy, right? And it's really actually not at this point. I mean, with great change comes great opportunity, right? I don't know who said that. Somebody really smart. I think this is a period of change now for the industry where, I'll throw a couple hypotheses out and ask if you guys agree or disagree with some of what's happening. So I think it goes back to this point about determinism and census data versus probability. We have an opportunity to strike a different balance, perhaps. Do you think that? I mean, do we think that's a good thing, guys? In other words, if I'm 80 or 90% sure this is the same consumer, that's going to get me attribution high quality. It's going to get me targeting high quality. I don't need to be exactly 100% accurate, because that's where the privacy problems started. I mean, do you agree with that concept? And is this an opportunity to change how we think about it? Yes or no?
Yeah, no, it totally is. I think that, go back to the Google issue problem, go back to the Google topic, though, a little bit. I mean, what is kind of both an opportunity and a little bit troubling at the same time is that it is a fairly significant vacuum, right, in terms of solutions right now. It seems to be, there, like, when, in the desktop digital days, right, that, like, cookies were kind of a natural, just at-hand solution. There isn't something necessarily like that. This feels quite as like natural as a next step. And if Google actually, invents something and puts it out there, and because they control like 40, 50% of the mobile kind of ad impressions or ad spend, really, that's almost instantly an overnight kind of solution. And but then you get worried about the fact that it's one party kind of driving an entire ecosystem, right, which is a little bit problematic in and of itself. So there's kind of it's a very
It's a dangerous period, in other words. We could
exactly.
have things tipped to control of one player, and and that obviously shouldn't happen, regardless of who that player is. I mean, John, do you have anything to add to this? Or?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I agree. I think that there are a number of solutions. None of them are perfect. I think the reason why we're testing them is to see whether or not they give us the kind of targeting accuracy that we want. So the more privacy compliant you become, the less accurate you are. The more privacy non-compliant you are, the more accurate you are. So we've got to find a middle ground where maybe 85% accurate is good enough for us from a targeting perspective, where we don't have to go back to the dark days of contextual marketing. But the other thing that you said, I don't want everybody to take away that this is doom and gloom.
Yeah.
I think that the DAA has just released the mobile guidelines. I think they're good, they're solid. The entire industry got behind them. There's a lot of momentum behind it as well. We just have to find the right kind of solution and make sure that we consult with the right number of people to get that through, so that we when we have a solution, there are not naysayers out there that say it can't work, it won't work.
Change is good. It brings in new players with new ideas. And the reality is, if you look at any industry over the last 100 years plus, whenever there is major change, very few of the companies that are doing something right now make the change, all right? No matter how big they are, right? So there will be new players, there will be fresh thinking, there will be fresh blood. No matter how big Google is, there will be something that they won't do as well in as other things, right? And this is true for all of the leaders that are out there right now. So it leaves a potential for again, new ideas, and for maybe some ideas that are better than the ones we have right now that don't cause as much controversy.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we've got exactly, our time is up. So I really want to thank Chia and John and Dave. Really thoughtful discussion, guys. Really appreciate the time. If you are listening in, I think you heard, check with the DAA and their guidelines. I think there's a lot of research and a lot of innovation, as Dave pointed out, happening. Look around you. There's tremendous opportunity out there to figure this out. It is a period of opportunity. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Let's give them a big round of applause.